G'day guys, Chronicles of Solid here and welcome back to another video. Today we're doing a first impressions ride of the much anticipated Tenere 700, so let's get into it. So before I take it out for a ride, I wanted to address the looks of the Tenere 700. Some people will absolutely love it, some people will hate it. I am in the middle. It looks very nice. It's definitely got that utilitarian, purposeful Dakar rally look. It's definitely not the prettiest bike in the room, but it's definitely not the ugliest either. So I think they've done a good job of hitting the mark and pleasing most people. Now there's lots of features on this bike that are quite nice to see. You can remove the rubber mounts on the foot pegs, as you'll see just down here, so that's great for off-road use. That metal bash plate is also nice to see. That's a standard feature. Also those tie down points just below my gloves there, you can either mount your luggage straight there or a luggage rack. The digital tacho is very comprehensive. It has lots of different information on it, which is nice to see, as well as switchable ABS. But I would like to have seen a TFT screen instead, but cutting costs, I can understand why they put that instead of a color screen. The folding lever, also a nice touch for those of us who drop bikes regularly. And the plastic hand guards, they might survive one drop, but I'd be putting bark busters on there quickly. But overall, a nice and well put together motorcycle, I think. So let's get on the road. So straight away, very comfortable. The seat's a bit hard. I definitely noticed that the first time I came and sat on this bike. So, what are you doing here, buddy? Crazy old man. Gear changes are very smooth. Not going to split today because, you know, not my bike. Very light clutch. I'd probably move that clutch actually because it's facing down a bit too much for me. But let's see how she goes out on the open road. Very easy to chuck in the corners. So this is a first impressions ride. It's definitely not an in-depth review. I'd need to have this bike for a week and do all styles of riding. But I only had half an hour on this bike, so first impressions video is what I'm going to call this. I headed straight for the open road here because that's one of the scenarios I find myself using an adventure bike for, is those big overland trips where I'm doing big Ks at high speeds and I want to know the bike can do 500-600 kilometers in a day and I'm not going to be a cripple at the end of it. So as you can see, the bike has more than enough power to get out of its own way and keep ahead of traffic. The bike feels very stable out on the open road. It somehow balances that act of being very maneuverable and nimble without feeling twitchy at all. So it's really, they've done a great job of the balance of this bike. The wind protection is also very nice. It's one of the few bikes I've hopped on where the wind protection has just been perfect straight out of the shop floor. So often I hop on a bike and I get buffeting quite badly on the helmet. This bike I was getting clean air straight onto my helmet. I'm 180 centimeters tall for those trying to gauge where you might sit in this. So for shorter riders, this will probably keep the wind off you completely. For taller riders, I think it'll just send clean air onto your helmet, which is just as nice. So great job there also. So being on the open road here, I was able to get a good sense of what the bike would be like on the big distance rides, and I think loaded up with luggage this would not have a problem at all. It would easily handle your camping gear and heading off into the sunset. Even with a pillion, I think it'd do a pretty good job. You'd obviously have to bump up the preload significantly to cope with the extra weight, but I think the engine has more than enough power to get the job done. It's comfortable enough, although I would change the seat. I think at this point I started to notice it is quite firm. I am very skinny though, so keep that in mind. I'm very sensitive to hard seats, so I think I'd be looking for a seat concepts replacement pretty soon if I bought this bike. But I think it's a very capable bike and would have no problems at doing the long distance touring. Obviously, if you're doing touring all the time and you do have a pillion and you're taking a lot of gear, you probably should be looking at a big GS 1250 or a Super Tenere anyway.
Some bikes you hop on and it takes a little while to learn the quirks. I mean, that's a process of all bikes, but some bikes make it very easy to get used to that, and this is one of those bikes. Just hop on it, a couple of minutes and you're used to everything. It's very confidence inspiring. Great contact point for the clutch. They'll even truck along in 6th gear and 60. So I'm betting you could get quite economical. So I'm 180 centimeters tall, perhaps a little bit more with the boots on and whatnot, but I can easily flat foot one foot on the ground while my other leg is on the brake. It is a tall bike. It feels about a little similar to the 660 Tenere, though not quite as tall as the 660. So about the same as my WR 250R, I think. So for short riders, you're definitely wanting that seat, that lower seat, and the lowering link, I think.
So just for reference, I did go and sit on the Tenere 700 with the lowering link and the lower seat when I got back to the dealership, and it did make a significant difference. So fear not, shorter riders. I was able to flat foot on that bike, so I think even the shorter riders should be fine. If not getting both feet on the ground, you should be able to at least scoot and get one foot firmly on the ground. If this is your first adventure bike and you are really concerned with the height, I can assure you that it is something you get used to, but I do also see how getting feet on the ground does give you a lot of confidence. So I would definitely ask the dealership to sit on the lower model just to make sure that you do feel comfortable on the bike. So veterans of off-road will want to know the ergonomics when standing up, and I got to say I was fairly impressed with this bike. Usually when I get on an adventure bike or a dual sport and I stand up, it's just not doable. I would have to immediately change the bars and put bar risers on to get comfortable standing up. This bike I could probably head straight out into the dirt and be comfortable standing. Now personally I'd probably put 1-inch risers on as well, but I was fairly surprised at how well this fit me standing up for a stock motorcycle.
Brakes are adequate, I would say. They're not hugely impressive, they're not super sport good, but they're definitely decent enough. I'd be confident in this bike and the brakes. It's got good bite, progressive feel.
Tenere 700 is a very smooth running motorcycle. That's a major plus in my book. It helps reduce fatigue and it just makes things more comfortable day to day. You definitely have character in the motor. It sounds brilliant with that 270-degree crank. The little motor is an absolute gem, but it's also very smooth, so there's no vibrations really in the bar. There's enough to let you know the motorcycle's alive, but it's not enough to make the ride miserable, so it's really nice.
Pretty decent turning circle considering the size of the bike. Yep, don't even need to feather the clutch.
I really like the gear ratio on the Tenere 700. First is quite short and then second is quite tall, so I think it'd really suit the off-road sections. That kind of spread, you really want a very short first gear for downhill descents and technical stuff. But then as you bang through the gears, they get taller and taller until you reach 6, which is a true overdrive, so it's very comfortable cruising in 6th gear at high speeds. There's no over-revving or extreme vibration. No bike is perfect, and the Tenere 700 is no exception. It is very, very good, but there are a few niggles with this bike. I would have liked to have seen them put on proper handguards. That's a criticism of all manufacturers, it's just a personal annoyance. I'd like to see them just put proper handguards on with metal bracing instead of the flimsy plastic ones that they do. I also mentioned before that the seat is quite firm. You might prefer that kind of thing, but myself, I'd need to swap that out. So that was a bit of a surprise. Given this is an adventure bike, I would have liked a more comfortable seat. I really liked the suspension. It was very compliant, it was plush but firm when it needed to be. Obviously it's hard to test when you're on the road what it will be like off-road, but I do suspect that if you're a heavier set person that you might need to do some suspension tuning if you're pushing this bike quite hard off-road. As I'm a fairly light person, I don't really push the suspension, especially on-road. So off-road, and if you're a bigger guy and you like to ride hard, you might look at tuning the suspension. The last two niggles are fairly minor. I would have liked to have seen traction control on this bike. It's not a necessity, but it would have made me feel a little safer for those wet days on the road with knobby tyres, but I'm happy to have a bike without it, just a little niggle. I also would have liked to have seen a TFT colour screen, maybe with some Bluetooth connectivity, instead of the simple digital dash that we have. But obviously Yamaha have to keep the price competitive, so it is what it is. Not big deal breakers, but just something I would have liked to have seen. And lastly, I just wanted to give a quick thank you and a shout out to Cully's Yamaha and specifically Ben for letting me hop on the bike and have a really good test ride, so thanks mate. So we're back in the garage. It's been a few days since I've ridden the Tenere 700, so I just wanted to give my summary and final thoughts on the bike. The middleweight adventure bike category is very competitive. We've got the F850 GS with all the technological features, and it's a very comfortable motorcycle to ride. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got the very hardcore, very powerful KTM 790 Adventure R. I think the Tenere 700 makes sense for the rider who's looking for something that's very value orientated. What I mean by that is you get a lot of bang for your buck. You're also looking for something that's very lightweight within the category of adventure bike. And you're also looking for something that's quite capable off-road. So I think if those are at the top of your list of features that you need out of a middleweight, this Tenere 700 makes a lot of sense. My experience has been very positive, although quite short. It was only half an hour, but I really enjoyed the ride. And I've been riding bikes for quite some time, so I can usually tell pretty quickly whether it's a bike I could put up with long term. And I think the Tenere 700 I most certainly could. So it gets the thumbs up from me. But I'd like to know your thoughts, especially owners. If you've got one, let me know your experiences so far. I think that would really help people who are reading the comments and thinking about owning this motorcycle. So please comment down below. As always guys, like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later.